Yo, what's going on, family? So yesterday I recorded a video, I put it out. I don't know if this is going to be put out the very next day. Maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But I put out a video called You Can Get Rid of Jesus, but What Do You Do About Your Cross? Or something to that effect. I forget my exact words. And it was just, that was sort of the end of the video. But really, it was a 45-minute video about just talking about the beginning of the conversation around me transitioning out of Christianity. If you're not familiar with my story, go check that out. Maybe I'll do a short version of that story at some point so people can always have context when they come back to this channel. But right now, I put on Twitter, I asked some questions. I asked people on Twitter, to give me some questions that they were interested in having a conversation about. And I was really thankful for the questions. They weren't what I thought they would be. Some of them were, some of them weren't. I thought they were really great questions. And I'm thankful for Christians and non-Christians who come to this space and don't see me as their enemy, but as a fellow human who's having a human experience as well. And I'm going to do my best to do the same for y'all. Sometimes, if I'm honest, it's hard when people, simplify you. You want to simplify them as well, and I have to make the conscious effort on my behalf too to engage in a way that humanizes the people that are listening to me, so that way we can actually have conversations. And the point of the conversation for me is, at least, one, is therapeutic. Yesterday, making that video was mad therapeutic, and seeing the comments that came after that. But also just understanding between humans, empathy. I've come to understand life as being very difficult in many ways, not just for myself, but in general, life is a very difficult thing, physically and mentally, and we're very limited people. And I think, with all of that, I think the one thing, if I could speak in hyperbole, and it's almost not hyperbole, I have to sit and think about this statement for a minute, but I do believe that more empathy is the thing that we need most in our country and in the world. People who are willing to actually listen to people who they don't agree with, and to humanize them. And I know, it's hard for me too, because if I'm honest, seeing people online, it makes you want to simplify them. And so hopefully for the people that do give me an ear for this time, you'll maybe understand people a little better, and that people who don't think like you, who have left spaces that you are in, are a little more complex than you want to make them out to be. So anyways, let me pull up these tweets and get to answering some questions. I thought some of them were good. Let's start here. This person had 4 questions. I think I might choose one. We'll see, because I said, yeah, I gave y'all an inch, I went a mile. No, I'm messing with you. This is from Killed the Critic, Rika, on Twitter. And her questions were: would you consider yourself spiritual now? What do you use to keep you enlightened on your new journey? Did you lose any people in your life during the transition? Number 4, was there a moment where you wanted to go back to what you originally believed? Man, great questions. I might try to touch on most of these at least. Would you consider yourself spiritual now? I'm going to be very vague, but I do consider myself spiritual now. I think that I'm an innately a spiritual person. Even if my spirituality is simply desiring to be spiritual, desiring to have more spirituality in my life. Because if I'm honest, there's some times where I don't feel as spiritual, but I do pray still sometimes. I made an Instagram post about this. Maybe it's a vestige of Christian faith. Here's the interesting thing. There's always this notion of we've heard from Christians say when people are really in a pinch and they're down on their luck, that's when they want to pray to God. Then all of a sudden, we'll see if you don't pray when the sort of fox in the hole idea, if you're stuck in a hole somewhere, the fox, I don't know what it is, Basically, if you're down bad, that's when you want to pray because you're scared. But I've noticed actually the times that I actually want to pray have been the very opposite. It's been moments where I actually, I feel grateful to someone, something outside of myself. One thing I have dropped from Christian culture that has been pressed in that space is this sort of over humility, this just hyper humility, where like you trash everything about yourself and that's a virtue and you never want to give yourself a pat on the back. And I've learned to give myself a lot of credit, and I'm freaking proud of me, and I am dope. I'm dope. You may not agree, but I'm dope. And I don't feel arrogant saying that. I'm dope and I'm proud of me. But I also know that much of the success and opportunities and experiences that I get to enjoy in my life, they're very much outside of myself. And sometimes things come together in such a beautiful way that on one side I can be proud of myself. I put in the work for it. I did what I was supposed to do to get in that space. But at the same time, I'm also like, I feel grateful to something or someone outside of me, someone who I don't have direct contact with, like a friend or family who may have put me in that position. So, I'm spiritual still. I actually, this is not even fake because I be journaling and I be writing. And, part of that, I still have a Bible. And, when I was in Christian world, something that held me there long enough was how when I read the Bible, there was something about it that really resonated with me, something very emotional, something very intangible, the wisdom of it. And I don't try to over-mystify it now. I think there's a ton of wisdom. I think what you have in the Bible is a collection of generations of people who have went through a lot of situations, and I believe that it's edited, and I can say that in a way that's, please don't take that as offensive. I think that you can actually be, if you knew what I meant by that, I won't get into it right now for the sake of time, but if you knew what I meant by that, you can actually be a very conservative Christian who believes in the infallibility of Scripture and know that it's edited. I mean, I learned about this in a extremely conservative seminary, and maybe in other spaces I'll kind of piece things together too. But you can really understand that the Bible has been pieced together, and you can still believe that God navigated that, He orchestrated that editing process. It's not incongruent to think that He uses human sources and human timeline in order to come with His ultimate purpose. So anyways, I think there's a lot of wisdom and stuff in the Bible, and a lot of spiritual practice that I think is still good. It's still very true. That still resonates with me. So next question. Did you lose any people in your life during this transition? Absolutely. Absolutely I did. But not in a violent or abrupt way. I think some people you just sort of fall off. It's kind of sad. It's like you when Christianity is your ultimate commonality, when you lose that, like what else is there to have? And so for the people that I really was just friends with on just like a deep, just friendship level, for the most part, we stick around. In little fragmented ways, but we stick around. But I've grown closer to some people too, which has been interesting. I feel like I've grown more intimacy with my parents because of this transition, because of the honesty, and even some friends. I feel like it's gotten better. So the last one I'll answer on this one is, was there a moment where you wanted to go back to what you originally believed? Yes and no. I did feel that when I went to the Poets in Autumn tour a couple of weeks ago. There was something inside of me that not necessarily wanted to go back to what I believed because I wanted to believe it was true, but there was something nostalgic about this space. I wanted to go back. The way that I fantasize about going back is much like fantasizing about going back to high school, you know? Not because high school is actually better than your life right now. Like, let's be real. Like, you know, you may be nostalgic about it, but, you know, you didn't have a car, you couldn't drive, you ain't had no money, you ain't had no autonomy, you used to stay at your parents' house, you know? And maybe your life has gotten worse since high school. My life has gotten better since high school. I don't want to go back to high school, but I do have like nostalgic moments of like, man, I wish I was in high school. I wish I was in college. So that's kind of how I feel about it now. Not that I think that Christianity is better for me, but there are pockets of it that were really nostalgic. They're really sweet moments about faith and church that I miss. I'm not gonna lie. If I can keep using the analogy of a married couple who got divorced, I don't think I'd love to ask that from a divorced person, but I wouldn't be surprised if many of them would say, man, that was a bad relationship for me to be in. I'm glad I got divorced. But there were moments of it that I miss. Even with this person I might be really bitter towards, like every now and then a moment will come like, man, I miss the way we used to do this and this restaurant we would go to and these moments we would have with our family. I wish that still existed. But I know that those moments can't exist. They cannot exist without the other moments that made this thing crumble. So, great question. Thank you for that. These are really inquisitive questions. Thank you. As someone who's going through the same thing and being raised in the church, most of my friends and peers being Christian, what advice do you have on navigating those murky waters? It's a very general question, but I'll try to be general and a little specific and kind of take some liberty with that. Advice that I would have is this. And some of this you'll learn, the wisdom of this you'll learn just by trial and error. But be radically honest, but with discretion. Like there are spaces that you want to be really honest with some people, and then some people you don't need to be honest with. You don't need to be transparent with them. They don't need to know your story because they'll muddy it up. And I'm okay with not wanting to share those moments with people. You know, because I'm a public figure, I had to, in some ways, I kind of had to share it publicly. But that doesn't mean that I have to. You know, I went to a concert yesterday and some people were coming up and kind of, you know, people say they want to pray for you, but they also really, they also want to spark a conversation and get a little more insight. They kind of being nosy. I don't know you, dog. I don't owe you nothing. There's a spectrum of people I owe an explanation to and people I couldn't care less. And then there's like something in between. So some people I'll give a little more transparency, but don't feel like you have to be honest with everybody or transparent with everybody. Also the next thing I would say is, have space to yourself. Don't feel pressed to have an explanation of where you're at the moment. Having someone that you can process with that privately, so that you don't have to process that with other people who kind of want to get you to get somewhere. Like I think the knee-jerk reaction of a lot of Christians is that, you know, kind of like what I said in my last video, if you know you're not staying, then surely you must know where you're going. It's like, I don't. And they'll try to pressure you into giving a full explanation, and they're almost like a jury, and you have to kind of defend your position to them. And it's like, I am completely okay when people ask me questions that I don't have an answer to. I'm like, man, you're right. I don't know. That is a great question. I haven't really figured that out. May never figure it out. Doesn't make it a case for me to stay. So that's kind of the general. And here's some really good advice that I really kind of got from my therapist. And I don't know if this is necessarily in relation to other people, but just relation to yourself. And it might just be good advice anyway. A lot of the Christian morality that you grew up in, the worldview of seeing the world through a very Christian lens, a lot of that is cultural baggage that's put onto you that is not a part of who you actually are. Right? But some of the North Stars that you feel inside yourself, that compass of how to handle yourself and how to handle others, some of that is actually true. Some of that is actually real, and it is part of you. And you have to navigate. Sorry, I keep rubbing my nose up here because I'm trying not to sneeze. You have to navigate that in a careful way. Don't be so quick to throw away all of your Christian morality because, it was part of Christianity. And you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some of it might actually be you. Some of the ethics that you feel about friendships, about sexuality, it will expand, but some of it you have to realize, like, I think I actually hold this as a truth for me, and I can't abandon that. You don't want to betray yourself. You can betray the faith of your childhood, but don't betray yourself in trying to let go of the past. So this is an interesting question. I guess I'll tap in for it. How do you view Calvinism post-transition? I had really transitioned out of Calvinism even as a Christian, like hardcore Calvinism. I probably still was influenced by it for sure. But this side of faith, man, I see it as bizarre. There are other spaces within church culture outside of Calvinist Reformed spaces that are bizarre, but particularly Reformed Calvinistic culture, I've kind of backed away and have a sort of wider view of the situation, and I'm not actually in the situation. I consider the way that I engage with people, the way that I engaged with brothers, the way that I engage with women, the sort of cultural norms within, the way that I engage with politics, I engage with myself, with music. Oh my God, I see it as bizarre. I'm trying to think of a very specific example so that I don't feel too vague for this answer. But I just feel when I'm trying to explain myself to my non-Christian friends now and people who just never were raised in church at all, and it doesn't feel weird when you're explaining it to somebody who's been through it, but then you try to explain to somebody who has no context for it. As it starts to come out of your mouth, you're like, okay, I know this sounds weird. I think one example is like the hyper pressure to like the whole conversation around family, like Calvinistic view of family, which would be like, the pressure to get married soon and quick. I'm not saying Calvin himself or Calvinism itself promotes this, but that it's sort of inherent within the culture, the way that the Reformed culture, should I say, of family and the way that they view biblical manhood and womanhood, and what is a man's role in the house and in society, and what is a woman's role in house and society, and what is the children's role, and what is the role of sex and dating, and that whole dynamic. When I'm trying to explain that to someone outside of that experience, who has no context for Calvinism, they don't even really have much context for Christian culture, they're just like, wait, you did what? I'm like, it didn't feel odd when I was in it. But now that you mention it, I could see how it's a little odd. It's just bizarre, man. All right, next question. Do you ever wish you could go back to the feeling of being right/certain? Meaning most religions believe they're the only ones to have the truth. Do you miss that feeling? This comes from Maya Codes on Twitter. And the last question, I'm sorry, it came from Black Father. I don't even know how to say his Instagram. I'm sorry, whatever. Do you ever wish you can go back to the feeling of being right or certain? Meaning most religions believe they're the only ones to have the truth. Do you miss that feeling? One quote that my therapist had for me, she said, ambiguity will always be for you. I think what was so attractive about particularly the, very systematic theology that I was involved in, going to seminary and, diving so deep into apologetics and just trying to dot all the I's, cross all the T's. There was something very alluring about the possibility of certainty. And certainty is a very elusive thing. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with certainty, because there are some things I actually am still certain about. Even if some of those things I'm certain that we can't be certain about it. I mentioned in the last video, I don't have doubt anymore. And I think that there's a different type of certainty I have now, where it's a certainty with the possibility of being proven wrong, versus the certainty within Christianity. It really is, I have a conclusion. This is where doubt arises. It arises out of curiosity. Curiosity that needs to have a destination turns into doubt. So what I mean is, I have curiosity, but I feel the obligation that this curiosity must lead me to this end. And if I feel like that curiosity is veering me somewhere else, I feel the tension of being pulled away from this conclusion. I know I need to get here, but it's taking me here, and I'm trying to steer it back. That is the tension of doubt. Versus a curiosity that doesn't have a set conclusion. I can be certain at this point, but I also know that my curiosity may lead me here, and I'm okay with it leading me here. I'm perfectly okay with that. And I think many Christians, even me saying it now, makes some of them sort of squirm in their seat. It makes them, it conjures up an apologetic response. If all truth is relative, I know all the pushback. But I'm okay with it now. I'm okay with it. Okay with it in the sense of I've accepted it. Is it always comfortable? No. But it is a much better tension for me than trying to force myself to in conclusion, So I don't miss that feeling of needing to be right, because it also has opened me up to many new experiences and people that I probably never would have experienced in the way that I do now if I had not been open to them. And by open, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I still reject. I still think something, astrology and a lot of the stuff that's especially out in LA, is a lot of everyone in LA is spiritual but not religious. And but I respect it though. I'm not, if they try to convince me, I have some pushback and questions, and often I can often end up sounding like a Christian apologetic or apologist, or just an apologist in general. Because I learned a lot of critical thinking skills from Christian apologetics. I owe a lot of my critical thinking to apologetics, specifically presuppositional apologetics. And so I reject a lot of it, but I don't feel the need to try to convince them or to try. I feel the need to ask probing questions, but I'm open in the sense of tell me more. But I have pushback, but tell me more. But my pushback is not, I think the difference between my pushback and the pushback of a Christian apologist, is trying to push back to get you to a conclusion, to get you here, and ultimately to save you from yourself and from damnation from God. But I'm not trying to save them. I'm just trying to clarify. And it's like, man, are you thinking through this as critically as you can? Is this congruent? Is this cohesive thinking? Does this make sense? Is this consistent? Is this based in reality? I just have questions. I have a lot of questions. But the conversations are not me trying to be an evangelist for my worldview. It's purely curiosity at this point. This is from They Call Me Latrice, or they call me Treese, but her name is Latrice. Shout out to Sky Club. Boo! I'm here for whatever you're willing to share with us, friend. Thanks. Not a question, but thanks. I appreciate the openness, and I appreciate your comment on the last video. This is from, how much time I got? I'll make this a 45-minute video. This is from My Forever. Do you believe in, I probably shouldn't open this one up, but here we are. I'm saying it now. Do you believe in a God/higher power at all? Was there a specific aha moment? And the last question is, what is something new that brings you joy in this season of life? And she gave a little heart emoji. Heart back to you, My Forever. Okay, do I believe in a God or higher power at all? Oh, the $1 million question. I guess I should go ahead and do it. I believe in the possibility. I think, here's the thing. I think it's not that I actively don't believe in God, because I don't actively not believe in God. So many people have assumed that I'm an atheist, and I think an atheist position is to actively say, no, there isn't a God. And I think even the traditional position of an agnostic is to say, I don't know, but I'm curious. I think my position is a little more nuanced in that I kind of have relieved myself from the concern of the conversation. Meaning I don't think it has any real everyday bearing on me as this very small speck in the universe. I'm not convinced that my active belief in or against God has any real use in my short lifespan. I believe that I wish maybe there's another video I can go extensively in this, but I think many of the language that we use about our morality and our standards and so forth, that we use and we invoke spiritual language and God-like language into it, can be explained in other ways. But that's, in more natural ways. But that's not to say that there isn't a God. I think it'd be pretty arrogant to say that there is not a God. There's so much we don't, literally my sort of ritual in the morning, every morning I watch a bunch of stuff, documentaries, science channels, all that. I'm just like so intrigued with astrophysics and astronomy and cosmology, quantum mechanics, evolution, anthropology, you name it. I'm just mad curious about it and our universe and all these different theories and about how our universe came into existence, how it will come to an end, if there ever is an end, the question of infinity and all that. And it just goes to show that, there's some really, really smart people out there thinking through this. And I think that we live in too vast of a universe to rule out that there is not some intelligent higher power at hand. And yet, that's not to force me to say that I have to be concerned with it. I don't feel the need to be concerned with it. That's kind of my position right now. And I'll do a whole nother video about this. I know that probably brings up a ton of questions now. I sort of liken it to, maybe this is a bad analogy. Somebody might tear it apart. But I kind of liken it to an ant in California. Well, let's say it's an ant in Texas, even better. Because Texas is always talking about they're going to secede from the Union. You know, every time there's a president they didn't like, we're going to get out of the Union. And there's this abstract power at hand of government, state government and federal government, legislations being passed, all the crazy things about abortion going on, and obviously the recent election cycle, all the stuff, the crazy stuff that's going on a governmental, federal, state level. And all of those things have no real bearing on an ant who lives in Texas. It's so above them. It's just, I think it may affect them in the sense of, like, say we went to war with the rest of the United States, Texas went to war with the rest of the United States, and then, I don't know, some kind of bomb is dropped on this ant, then yeah, it has very practical effects on his life. But in a very normal, everyday sense, the things that go on that high above him, it doesn't concern him to debate whether or not a United States exists. Let's say he did take his time debating whether or not the United States existed, and he came to the conclusion that the United States existed. What's he going to do about it? Like, from an ant's perspective, is there much he can do to have some sort of say-so in how that affects him? No. That's where I think it's at. I know many Christians will disagree, especially when you think about a personal God who's come down from heaven and says, no, yes, you're right. There is a chasm between God and humanity. Yes, there is a huge divide, and that's why Jesus came, is to connect the divide. I think that's great. That's great. If that's true, like that's what would be necessary, I think, to make the conversation of God relevant, is that this God would be intentional enough to be like, I'm really concerned about this particular group here. I just think that it gives off very main character vibes. Like, in LA, everyone's the main character. Everyone is like, I'm the dopest person in the city. Everyone's concerned about me. I feel like so many people here are like that. And people in general are like that in the world. And I think that is the collective idea about religion, is that we are the main character of this movie of the universe. Just the same way the guy who's walking down the sidewalk singing out loud to himself with his shirt off and sunglasses on at night, he's the main character of the movie of LA, but he's not really. It's just good for him to think that way, to him. That's my thought on that. Ooh, I know that opened up a can of worms. All right, how much time I got? I got about 10 more minutes left of answering this. Let's see. Some of these I've already answered in some other way. What was the first thought what was the first thought that brought you to where you are in your faith today? And do you ever think about the inverse of that thought today? I'm not exactly sure what this question means. Let me read it again, because my coffee still has to process. What was the first thought that brought you to where you are in your faith today? And do you ever I don't think there was I don't think there was a first thought that I could pinpoint back to. I think I've just always been an inquisitive person. I was debating the existence of God, or at least having conversations about the existence of God at like 8 or 9. I remember it. It had to be 8 or 9 because I remember the house, the conversation, who I was having the conversation with, and the time frame of my life that he lived there. So it was like 8, maybe 10, and I'm like having this conversation with him, like, all right, if God created everything, like who created God? And having this sort of, I forget who came up with this the unmoved mover. And it's like, well, everything has to have an effect. Every effect has to have a cause, but it has to be an unmoved mover, an uncaused cause. Or we just go down to infinite regress. I didn't have the language for it at the time, but that's essentially what I was saying. So I've just always been in that world. And I don't know if there's ever a first thought or a singled out thought. There's many thoughts that came together that got me to where I am today, and that continue to have. And it's great sometimes. Sometimes it's a little frustrating, as some of you can relate. How did you stay present / true to yourself through all the scrutiny that came? Were there people of Christian faith who held it down for you while you transitioned out? All right, how did I stay present, true to myself? Well, through therapy. Man, my therapist, who's a Christian, man, she, to this day, is like vigilant of calling me out when I do things that are performative, that I want to do things that are performative. I'm doing things for the sake of other people and wanting to put other people's opinion first. And so therapy has been great for me to kind of keep that in check, because that is a sort of a habit of mine, a knee jerk, to want to do things I never would define myself as a people pleaser. I would never use that language, but through therapy, I've kind of realized, like, hey, you do things that are very much people pleasing. You put yourself in positions longer than you should be so that you won't cause discomfort for other people. And it's at the expense of your own comfort, which is a good thing sometimes. There are times in life that it calls for that, but not all the time. So that, being exploratory of spaces, trying to figure out what that, when it means, when you say be true to yourself, so much of myself has been defined by Christian theology. And when you let that go, you're like, well, who is that self? And so it's this last year and some change, almost 2 years, it's been very exploratory, and it's come with a lot of mistakes. And so I've had to learn some of what is quote unquote the true me existed long before I was deep into religion. I'm talking things that are present about me now were true when I was 5 or 6 years old, even if I didn't have the language for it then. And so I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my childhood in a way that I didn't used to before. I think so much of my childhood was reflected in the light of sin as a Christian. And now it's like looking back and seeing what about me was truly beautiful, that I want to bring out as a grown man. And were there people of faith who held it down for you while you transitioned out? Absolutely. My pastor, who I'm still cool with, John Onwuchekwa, some of you have heard him on my podcast, really dope dude. We still stay in contact. I'm so thankful for him that he sees me as a human, and the benefit that I offer him outside of Christian faith. He cherishes who I am outside of Christian faith, and that's been very meaningful to me, that he still checks in and he's still intrigued about me, and not simply because he wishes for me to be Christian again. I think sometimes a lot of Christians do this sort of Trojan horse friendship where it's like, oh, I got to befriend this person with this Trojan horse, but really inside is an army of evangelism. I can't just come in with the army of evangelism. I got to come in with friendship. And it's very 007-ish. And, I don't like that. And so I can pick up on it because I've been a part of that culture so long. So John, my family, I got to shout out my parents who, they were frustrated and hurt, early on, and maybe still are. We don't get into specifics much these days, but it was hard for them to receive that news. And there was a lot of pushback and questioning. And even the day that I announced publicly that I wasn't a Christian, if I can put the business out there, they were, kind of upset. Like they didn't know that I didn't warn them I was about to do it publicly, even though they had known for months. And, they kind of feared the conversation that would be brought to their door. But when they saw how hurt I was by a lot of the responses from people that followed me, people that were my Christian peers, man, they switched modes so quickly. And they realized like, oh, yes, as a Christian parent, it is part of my role to want my child to be a Christian and for them to know Jesus and love Jesus. That's like one of their biggest, if not biggest, desire for me. And they activated in that role when I first told them, which is completely understandable. But they also immediately knew that, well, the job of a parent is also to just love and protect and care and be a space of safety. And they turned that on so fast when I felt like many people were against me. And they saw how hard I was taking it that week. My mom switched gears, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful to have that. So, last question, because I'm trying to keep this around 45 minutes. Let's see. Oh, I didn't answer the last question of my mind. I'll do that. My mind forever. What is something? Two questions I'll do. I was just telling somebody about this last night. Was there a specific aha moment? There was a lot of aha moments, but there's a couple of ones that stood out most. Is when one, oftentimes when I was doubting as a Christian and I had a speaking gig coming up and I was really going through it spiritually, I somehow always found a way to sort of get myself out of the rut and really dig in and be prepared to be vulnerable, but also profound and productive and useful in a Christian space when it came time to, it felt genuine. I had to sit with it for a while, but it felt genuine, that feeling before, getting on stage in front of people and performing or speaking or whatever. But I remember during 2020, I was really going through it. And I really didn't want to, I was kind of already trying to transition out of the public or the Christian public spotlight to just exist as a general creative, so that I hadn't left Christianity in my heart, but I knew I didn't want to do it publicly anymore. So I was just going to kind of drag that out. I'm kind of done asking questions and searching for answers. Let me just kind of chill for a minute and just, move at my own pace as just a regular Christian. But then I got called out to this event that, it wasn't the money that motivated me to go. It was really the relationship that I had with the people. And I didn't want to let them down. And I really loved who they are and what they stood for. And I got called out to be the speaker at a church, at a conference, youth conference. And I knew after that event, that was the last sermon I'd ever preach. I felt it. That was the time that I could not conjure up anything. And it felt so forced. It felt so forced. And I never wanted to be in that position again. If I'm honest, I felt fake. And it crawled on me, man. That guilt crawled on me. And I never wanted to feel that again. So I knew this may be the beginning of a new era. Whether I was going to stay in Christianity or not, I knew that there would never be a way that I was going to go back and publicly proclaim like this again. So there was that. And then my time in LA, I went to LA for a month, a few months after that. And the freedom I felt in LA with people who were Christian and non-Christian, I wanted to feel that all the time. Okay, I ran out of memory card space, so that should tell me it was going too long. So I answered that question. We're done. And yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for asking the questions. And we'll continue this conversation. I hope this was helpful to some, or just clarifying, or just interesting to some. Again, I want to create a space of people where I'm not someone's enemy. I don't see them as my enemy. I want to curate that kind of community here, aside from my other channel where I feel like it just wasn't possible there. So I hope that it's possible here. I love y'all, and I hope y'all have a great week, man.